Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, watching the alien ships approach through the viewport. The massive vessels looked nothing like human ships. They were sleek and curved, with a blue metallic shine that caught the light from the nearby star. Each ship was 3 times larger than his diplomatic vessel. "They're beautiful," whispered Communications Officer Tony Martinez from his station. "But they make me nervous." Jake nodded. He felt the same way. This was humanity's first real meeting, with an alien race, and everyone was on edge. The Zephyrian Commonwealth had agreed to meet at this neutral location near the Kepler 442 system. Both sides had been planning this moment for months. "Captain, we're getting a signal from the lead ship," Tony said, adjusting his headset. "They want to come aboard in 30 minutes. "Tell them we're ready," Jake replied. He turned to face his crew. "Everyone remember the briefing. These aliens value respect and order above everything else. No sudden movements, no loud voices, and definitely no jokes." The bridge crew nodded seriously. Jake walked toward the elevator that would take him to the main conference room. His boots clicked on the metal floor as he moved through the corridors of his ship. The UES Harmony was not a warship. It was built for peace talks and scientific missions. The walls were painted in calm blue colors, and the rooms were designed to make visitors feel welcome. In the conference room, Ambassador Linda Carter was checking her notes one more time. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and kind eyes. Linda had spent years studying alien cultures and languages. If anyone could make this meeting work, it was her. "Are you ready for this?" Jake asked her. Linda looked up from her papers. "As ready as anyone can be for first contact with an alien species," she said with a small smile. "I just hope they're as interested in peace as we are." "Mom, are they really going to be scary looking?" asked a young voice from the corner of the room. Jake turned to see Emma Carter, Linda's 8-year-old daughter, sitting at a small table with coloring books and crayons. The little girl had blonde hair and pigtails and wore a bright yellow dress. She looked up at them with curious blue eyes. "I told you, sweetie, they just look different from us," Linda said gently. "Remember what we talked about? Different doesn't mean scary." Emma nodded, but Jake could see she was still nervous. The child was only here because her regular babysitter had gotten sick at the last minute. Linda had no choice but to bring her daughter along on this historic mission. "Don't worry, Emma," Jake said, kneeling down beside her table. "I'll make sure nothing bad happens to you or your mom." The girl smiled at him. "Thank you, Captain Jake. Will you tell me about the aliens after they leave?" "I promise," Jake said, standing up as the door chimed. Dr. Kate Sullivan entered the room. She was the ship's medical officer and would be monitoring everyone's health during the meeting. "The alien shuttle has docked," she announced. "They're coming through the airlock now." Jake felt his heart rate increase. This was it. Humanity was about to meet another intelligent species face to face. He straightened his uniform and took his position near the door. The aliens entered the room slowly. Jake tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to be amazed. The Zephyrians were tall, nearly 8 feet in height. Their skin was covered in blue scales that seemed to shift color in the light. They had 4 arms instead of 2, and their faces were long and narrow with large golden eyes. They moved with precise military steps. The leader stepped forward. He was larger than the others and wore what looked like a uniform covered in metal decorations. When he spoke, his voice was deep and harsh. "I am High Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Commonwealth," he said in heavily accented English. "We come to speak with the humans about territory and trade." Linda stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Welcome aboard the UES Harmony, High Commander. I am Ambassador Linda Carter, representing Earth and all human colonies. We are honored by your presence." Vextar's golden eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. When his gaze fell on Emma, his expression changed. The child was peeking at him from behind her coloring table, her eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. "Why is there a juvenile present at these important proceedings?" Vextar asked, his voice showing clear displeasure. "This is no place for offspring." Linda kept her voice calm and respectful. "My daughter is here due to unexpected circumstances, High Commander. She will not interfere with our discussions. Children are precious to us, and we believed you would understand our need to keep our families safe. In Zephyrian society, juveniles do not attend adult matters, Vextar said firmly. They remain in designated areas until they reach maturity. This shows lack of discipline. Jake could see the tension building. The other alien officers behind Vextar were also staring at Emma with what looked like disapproval. The little girl seemed to sense the negative attention and moved closer to her mother. Perhaps we could begin with our formal presentations, Linda suggested, trying to change the subject. We have prepared information about human culture and our goals for this meeting. The talks continued for the next hour. Linda presented humanity's hopes for peaceful trade and cultural exchange. The Zephyrians listened but showed little emotion. Their responses were short and focused only on practical matters like resources and territorial boundaries. Emma tried to stay quiet, but children are naturally curious. She watched the aliens with fascination, sometimes whispering questions to her mother. Each time she spoke, Jake noticed Vextar's eyes narrow with irritation. During a break in the formal discussions, Emma got up from her table to stretch her legs. She walked around the room, looking at the displays Linda had set up showing human art and technology. The aliens watched her every move with what seemed like disapproval. Near the center of the room sat a beautiful crystal sculpture that the Zephyrians had brought as a gift. It was shaped like a twisted spire and seemed to glow with inner light. Emma had been admiring it from a distance all morning. "It's so pretty," she whispered to herself, moving closer to get a better look. The crystal was sitting on a small table. That was just the right height for an 8-year-old to examine closely. Emma reached out her hand, not to touch but just to see how the light played through the crystal's surface. As she leaned forward, her elbow bumped the edge of the table. The ancient crystal sculpture wobbled for a moment, seemed to balance, then toppled over the edge. The sound of the crystal hitting the metal floor was like thunder in the quiet room. The beautiful sculpture shattered into hundreds of pieces, sending glittering fragments across the floor. Emma gasped and stepped back, her hands flying to her mouth. I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Every Zephyrian turned to stare at the broken crystal, then at the little girl who had destroyed it. High Commander Vextar's scales began to change color, darkening to an angry purple shade. Linda immediately moved to her daughter's side. "High Commander, I sincerely apologize. It was an accident. Emma didn't mean to break your gift. We will, of course, replace it or provide compensation." But Vexatar was not listening to apologies. His forearms were clenched into fists, and his golden eyes blazed with fury. In Zephyrian culture, the crystal represented centuries of tradition and craftsmanship. Its destruction was not just an accident, it was an insult to their entire civilization. Jake could see the situation spinning out of control. The other alien officers were also showing signs of anger, their scales darkening and their postures becoming more aggressive. Emma was crying now, scared by the hostile attention focused on her. "Please," Linda said, her voice steady, despite the fear Jake could see in her eyes. "She's just a child. She meant no harm." High Commander Vextar stepped forward, looming over the small girl. His voice was cold as winter space when he spoke. "This juvenile has destroyed sacred property of the Zephyrian people. In our society, such actions require immediate discipline, regardless of age." The moment that would change galactic history was about to begin. High Commander Vextar towered over 8-year-old Emma Carter like a mountain of angry blue scales. The broken crystal fragments sparkled on the floor around them, each piece catching the light like tiny stars. Emma's small hands trembled as she looked up at the alien commander, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted to see it better. I'm really sorry." Vexatar's forearms crossed over his chest as his scales continued to darken with rage. The other Zephyrian officers behind him moved closer, forming a threatening circle around the child. Their golden eyes glowed with anger as they stared down at her. "Apologies mean nothing," Vextar growled, his deep voice echoing in the conference room. The sacred crystal of memories contained the essence of our ancestors. It was created over 3,000 years ago. Your careless juvenile has destroyed something that can never be replaced. Ambassador Linda Carter stepped protectively in front of her daughter, her diplomat training keeping her voice calm despite the fear in her eyes. High Commander, please understand that Emma is just a child. She didn't know the importance of the crystal. In human culture, we believe children learn from their mistakes. Surely we can find a way to make this right. Your human customs are meaningless here, Vextar snapped. In Zephyrian law, destruction of sacred property demands immediate punishment. Age is not considered. The juvenile must face discipline according to our ways. Captain Jake Morrison felt his muscles tense as he watched the scene unfold. Every instinct in his body told him to protect the child, but he knew that interfering could destroy any chance of peace between the two species. He stayed in position near the door, his hand resting on his sidearm. Dr. Kate Sullivan moved quietly along the wall, positioning herself where she could quickly reach Emma if needed. Her medical training made her acutely aware of how small and vulnerable the child looked surrounded by the massive aliens. What kind of discipline are you talking about? Linda asked, trying to keep the negotiation going. Perhaps community service or educational programs. We could arrange for Emma to learn about Zephyrian culture and history. Vexitar's laugh was harsh and cold. You speak of learning as if this juvenile deserves consideration. In our society, those who destroy sacred objects receive physical correction. It is the only way to ensure they understand the gravity of their actions. Emma peeked around her mother's legs, still sniffling from her tears. The sight of the angry aliens frightened her, but she was trying to be brave like her mother had taught her. I promise I'll be more careful, she said in her small voice. Please don't be mad at me. The innocent words seemed to make Vextar even angrier. His scales shifted to an even darker purple, and his golden eyes narrowed to slits. This juvenile shows no understanding of what she has done. She speaks of carefulness as if that repairs the damage. Discipline must be swift and memorable. You will not touch my daughter, Linda said firmly, her diplomatic composure finally cracking. She pulled Emma behind her completely, shielding the child with her own body. I don't care about your customs. No one is going to hurt my little girl. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. The Zephyrian officers spread out slightly, their military training evident in their coordinated movements. Captain Morrison's crew members along the walls shifted nervously, unsure of what to do in this unprecedented situation. Communications Officer Tony Martinez had his hand hovering over the emergency alert button that would signal the bridge. His eyes darted between his captain and the aliens, waiting for any sign of what action to take. Vextar stepped closer to Linda and Emma, his massive form casting a shadow over them both. You will not prevent Zephyrian justice, human. Stand aside or you will be considered an accomplice to this crime. Crime? Jake finally spoke up, unable to stay silent any longer. She's 8 years old. It was an accident. Where I come from, we don't punish children for honest mistakes. Your primitive human concepts of child rearing are why your species lacks discipline, Vextar replied without turning to look at Jake. This juvenile will learn proper respect, starting now. Emma began to cry harder as the shouting continued. Around her, the sound of her sobs seemed to fill the room, a sharp contrast to the harsh voices of the arguing adults. She didn't understand why the tall alien was so angry at her, or why everyone was yelling. Mommy, I want to go home, Emma whispered, tugging on her mother's sleeve. I don't like it here anymore. Linda knelt down and hugged her daughter tightly. It's going to be okay, sweetheart. Nobody is going to hurt you, I promise. But Vextar had reached the end of his patience. In Zephyrian society, the continued defiance of the humans was seen as an additional insult. The fact that the child was still crying instead of accepting punishment showed a complete lack of proper upbringing. Enough, Vextar roared, his voice booming through the conference room. This juvenile will learn respect immediately. Before anyone could react, the massive alien commander pushed past Linda with one of his forearms. The diplomat stumbled backward, caught off guard by the sudden movement. Emma found herself face to face with the angry Zephyrian, his golden eyes blazing down at her. "You will be silent and accept your punishment," Vextar commanded, raising one of his scaled hands high above his head. Emma looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. She didn't understand the alien words completely, but she could see the anger and violence in his posture. Her small body began to shake with fear as she realized what was about to happen. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered, her voice breaking, with sobs. "I said I was sorry." The sight of the frightened child seemed to enrage Vextar even more. In his culture, fear was seen as weakness, and weakness deserved no mercy. His hand came down with tremendous force, striking Emma across her left cheek with a sound that echoed through the room like a gunshot. The blow sent the small girl tumbling to the floor, her yellow dress spreading around her as she fell. A dark bruise immediately began to form on her pale cheek where the alien's scaled hand had connected. Emma lay still for a moment, stunned by the pain and shock of being hit. The room fell completely silent except for Emma's quiet whimpering. Every human in the conference room stared in horror at the sight of the injured child on the floor. The moment seemed to stretch forever, as if time itself had stopped to witness what had just happened. Captain Jake Morrison felt something snap inside his mind. Years of military training and diplomatic protocol vanished in an instant, replaced by pure protective instinct. No one, human or alien, struck a child under his protection and walked away. With a roar of fury that surprised even himself, Jake launched himself across the room at High Commander Vextar. The alien was larger and stronger, but Jake had speed and momentum on his side. He tackled the Zephyrian around the waist, sending both of them crashing to the floor among the broken crystal fragments. "You son of a bitch," Jake shouted as they struggled on the ground. "You don't hit children, ever." Linda rushed to Emma's side, gathering her crying daughter into her arms. The little girl's cheek was already swelling, and tears streamed down her face as she clung to her mother. "It hurts, Mommy," Emma sobbed. "Why did he hit me?" "I said I was sorry." Dr. Kate Sullivan was there instantly, her medical scanner already in her hands as she checked Emma's injuries. The other Zephyrian officers moved forward to help their commander, but found themselves facing the barrels of human weapons as security. Chief Ryan Brooks and his team surrounded them. "Nobody moves," Ryan commanded, his voice deadly calm. "Keep your hands where we can see them." The diplomatic mission had just become something else entirely. The sound of Emma's crying filled the room as both species realized that everything had changed in that single moment of violence. There would be no going back from what had just happened. On the bridge of the UES Harmony, alarms began to sound as the Zephyrian fleet powered up their weapons systems. The alien ships had detected the fight in the conference room and were preparing for battle. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone hurt a human child. The emergency alarms on the UES Harmony screamed through every corridor as Captain Jake Morrison picked himself up from the floor. High Commander Vextar was also getting to his feet, his blue scales now dark with rage. The alien commander's golden eyes blazed as he stared at the human who had dared to attack him. "You have made a grave mistake, human," Vextar growled, brushing crystal fragments from his uniform. "Assaulting a Zephyrian commander is an act of war." Jake didn't care about war or diplomacy anymore. All he could see was little Emma Carter, in her mother's arms, her small face swollen and bruised from the alien strike. The sight made his blood boil with protective fury. "The only mistake was letting you aboard my ship," Jake replied, his voice cold as space. "Security, escort these aliens back to their shuttle. Now." Security Chief Ryan Brooks kept his weapon trained on the Zephyrian officers while his team moved into position. "You heard the captain. Move toward the airlock slowly." But Vextar was not finished. He activated a communication device on his wrist and spoke in his own language to his fleet. The harsh alien words echoed in the conference room as he gave what sounded like urgent orders. Dr. Kate Sullivan continued examining Emma's injuries with her medical scanner. The little girl was conscious but clearly in pain. Her left cheek was swollen and turning purple, and she had trouble opening her eye on that side. "Mommy, it really hurts," Emma whispered, reaching up to touch her bruised face. Don't touch it, sweetheart, Linda said gently, holding her daughter close. Dr. Kate is going to make it better. Kate looked up at Linda with concern in her eyes. She has a fractured cheekbone and severe bruising. Nothing life-threatening, but she needs proper medical treatment immediately. The news hit everyone in the room like a physical blow. A fractured bone meant that Vextar's strike had been even more violent than it appeared. The alien had used enough force to break the facial bone of an 8-year-old child. Tony Martinez's voice crackled through the ship's communication system from the bridge. Captain, the alien fleet is powering weapons and moving into attack formation. They're demanding we surrender you immediately for assaulting their commander. Jake looked down at Emma, then at the Zephyrian officers who showed no sign of remorse for what their leader had done. His decision was instant and absolute. Tell them to go to hell, Jake replied into his communicator. No one hurts a child on my ship and makes demands. Communications officer Tony Martinez had been recording everything that happened in the conference room as standard diplomatic procedure. Now he made a decision that would change galactic history. He transmitted the security footage of Vextar striking Emma directly to Earth Command, but he also sent it to every human colony and ship in the sector. The images spread through human space faster than any official government message ever could. Within minutes, the footage appeared on news networks, military channels, and civilian communications across dozens of worlds. The sight of a massive alien striking a small human child triggered something primal in every person who saw it. On the mining colony of New Denver, Foreman Bill Tucker was having lunch when the footage appeared on his tablet. He watched in horror as the alien's hand struck Emma's face, sending the little girl tumbling to the floor. Bill had 3 daughters of his own, and the sight made him physically sick with rage. That's it, Bill announced to his crew, slamming his fist on the table. Load the mining charges into the shuttle. We're going to help that little girl. Similar scenes played out across human space. On the cargo hauler Big Betty, Captain Sue Williams immediately changed course toward the Kepler 442 system. Her ship wasn't built for fighting, but she welded missile pods to the hull and armed herself with everything she could find. Nobody hits our kids, Sue told her crew as they prepared for departure. Nobody. The response was not organized or planned by any government or military command. It was pure human instinct, the same protective drive that had helped their species survive since the dawn of time. When one of their children was threatened, humans put aside all other concerns and fought back with everything they had. Admiral Lisa Parker was commanding the nearest official military fleet when the footage reached her flagship. She watched the images 3 times, her anger growing with each viewing. Emma reminded her of her own granddaughter back on Earth. All ships, emergency jump to Kepler 442, she ordered her fleet. Maximum speed. Admiral, we don't have authorization for military action, her second-in-command reminded her. Lisa Parker looked at him with fire in her eyes. I'll worry about authorization later. Right now, there's a little girl who needs our protection. Back, on the UES Harmony, the situation was getting worse by the minute. The Zephyrian fleet had completely surrounded the diplomatic ship, and their weapons were fully charged. Vextar spoke into his communicator again, then turned to face Captain Morrison. My fleet commander demands your immediate surrender, Vextar announced. You will be taken to our homeworld to face justice for your assault on a Zephyrian officer. Refuse, and this ship will be destroyed. Jake looked around the room at his crew, and the 2 civilians he was sworn to protect. Emma was still crying, softly in her mother's arms, her innocent face marked by alien violence. The sight strengthened his resolve. Counteroffer, Jake replied calmly. You and your fleet leave human space immediately, or you'll discover why we don't let anyone hurt our children. Vexitar's scales darkened further with rage. You are 1 small ship against 12 of our heavy cruisers. Your threats are meaningless. Are they? Jake asked, pointing to the tactical display that Tony had activated on the wall screen. The display showed local space around their position, and it was filling up with human ships. Dozens of vessels were dropping out of hyperspace every few minutes, all heading directly toward the standoff. Most were civilian ships, freighters, mining vessels, colony transports, and private yachts. but all of them were armed and ready for battle. "What is this?" Vextar demanded, staring at the growing fleet of human ships. "That's what happens when you hurt one of our children," Jake explained simply. "Every human who saw what you did to Emma is coming here to make sure it never happens again." The truth was that Jake was as surprised as the aliens by the massive response. He had expected some military backup, but the scale of the civilian reaction was beyond anything he could have imagined. Hundreds of ships were converging on their position from across human space. Linda Carter looked up from caring for her daughter, tears in her eyes as she watched the display. "They're all coming to help Emma?" "They're coming to help all of us," Jake replied. "Because that's what humans do. We protect our own." On the bridge, Tony Martinez was receiving dozens of communications from the approaching human vessels. The messages were all similar: ordinary people dropping everything in their lives to rush to the aid of an injured child they had never met. "Captain, I'm getting reports from across human space," Tony announced over the intercom. "The footage has reached Earth. The President is calling an emergency session of the Global Council. Our entire military is mobilizing." Vextar watched the tactical display with growing concern. His 12 ships had seemed like an overwhelming force when they surrounded the lone diplomatic vessel. Now they found themselves vastly outnumbered by an enemy they had severely underestimated. "This changes nothing," Vextar declared, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Quantity cannot overcome quality. Our technology is superior to yours." Dr. Kate Sullivan finished treating Emma's immediate injuries and helped the little girl sit up carefully. Emma's eye was still swollen shut, but she was alert and looking around the room with curiosity despite her pain. "Why are all those people coming to help me?" Emma asked innocently, looking at the tactical display full of approaching ships. Linda smiled through her tears and hugged her daughter gently. "Because people love children, sweetheart. And when someone hurts a child, good people come to make sure it doesn't happen again." Emma nodded seriously, processing this information with the logic of an 8-year-old. Then she looked directly at Vextar with her one good eye. "You shouldn't hit kids," she told the alien commander matter-of-factly. "It's not nice, and it makes people really mad at you." The simple words from the injured child hit harder than any diplomatic protest or military threat. Even some of the Zephyrian officers behind Vexatar seemed uncomfortable with what their commander had done. But Vexatar's pride would not allow him to show weakness. He activated his communicator one final time and spoke urgently to his fleet. The response came back immediately, and his expression grew grim. "Human vessels, this is your final warning," Vextar announced. "Surrender your captain and withdraw, or face the full might of the Zephyrian Commonwealth." The answer came not from Captain Morrison, but from Admiral Lisa Parker's flagship as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Her voice was broadcast on all frequencies, clear and strong. "This is Admiral Parker of the Human Defense Fleet. Any ship that threatens that little girl will answer to me personally. You have 5 minutes to withdraw from human space." The battle lines were drawn. On one side, 12 advanced alien warships confident in their technological superiority. On the other, hundreds of human vessels united by their rage at seeing a child harmed. The space around Kepler 442 looked like a massive gathering of angry bees. Hundreds of human ships floated in formation, their weapons pointed toward the 12 Zephyrian cruisers. The alien vessels seemed small now, surrounded by the growing human fleet that continued to arrive from across the galaxy. Admiral Lisa Parker stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Defender, watching the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Her own military fleet of 30 warships had been joined by over 300 civilian vessels. Mining ships, cargo haulers, passenger transports, and even luxury yachts had all answered the call to protect little Emma Carter. "Admiral, we're receiving final ship counts," reported her communications officer. "The civilian vessels outnumber our military ships 10 to 1. Some of them have welded missile pods to their hulls and armed themselves with mining charges." Lisa nodded. She had never seen anything like this response in her 30 years of military service. The footage of 8-year-old Emma being struck by the alien commander had united humanity in a way that no government order ever could. "Open a channel to all human vessels," Lisa commanded. "Let everyone hear this. Across the human fleet, captains and crews listened as Admiral Parker's voice reached every ship. Today we fight not for territory or resources, but for something much more important. We fight for the safety of our children. No alien species will harm a human child and walk away unpunished. On the UES Harmony, Captain Jake Morrison held Emma Carter in his arms while Dr. Kate Sullivan made final adjustments to the little girl's medical bandages. Emma's left eye was still swollen shut, and the bruise on her cheek had darkened to a deep purple. "Captain Jake, are all those people really here because of me?" Emma asked, looking out the viewport at the massive human fleet with her one good eye. "They're here because they care about you, sweetheart," Jake replied gently. "Every person out there has children or remembers being a child. They know that what happened to you was wrong." Ambassador Linda Carter stood nearby, watching her injured daughter with tears in her eyes. The diplomat in her knew that this situation was spiraling out of control, but the mother in her felt grateful that so many people cared about Emma's safety. High Commander Vextar and his officers remained under guard in the conference room. The alien commander's earlier confidence had faded as he watched the human fleet grow larger and more threatening. His own 12 ships were now vastly outnumbered, but Zephyrian pride would not allow him to admit fear. "Your people show their weakness by gathering like frightened animals," Vextar declared, though his voice lacked its earlier strength. "The Zephyrian Commonwealth does not bow to emotional displays." "We'll see about that," Jake replied coldly, then spoke into his communicator. "Admiral Parker, the UES Harmony is ready to make our run to your position." The plan was simple but dangerous. Jake's diplomatic ship would try to reach the safety of Admiral Parker's fleet while the Zephyrian cruisers attempted to stop them. It would give the aliens a chance to back down or start a war they could not win. Dr. Kate Sullivan prepared Emma for the high-speed maneuver by securing her in a specially padded medical chair. "This might be scary, sweetheart, but Captain Jake is an excellent pilot. You'll be safe." Emma nodded bravely, though Jake could see she was frightened. The little girl had been through more trauma in one day than most adults experienced in a lifetime, yet she still tried to be strong for everyone around her. "All hands prepare for emergency acceleration," Jake announced throughout his ship. He took his position at the helm while his crew secured themselves for what could be their final flight. The UES Harmony's engines roared to life, pushing the diplomatic vessel toward the human fleet at maximum speed. Behind them, the Zephyrian cruisers moved to intercept, their weapons charging with deadly energy. "Here they come," reported Tony Martinez from his communications station. "The alien ships are moving to cut us off." The first shots of what would become known as the Battle of Kepler 442 came from the Zephyrian heavy cruiser Eternal Pride. Blue energy beams lanced through space, barely missing the fleeing diplomatic ship. The near miss sent vibrations through the UES Harmony's hull. Emma gripped the arms of her medical chair tightly as the ship shook around her. "I'm scared, Mommy," she whispered. "It's going to be okay, baby," Linda said, holding her daughter's hand. "Look at all those ships out there. They're all here to keep you safe." Admiral Parker watched the chase unfold on her tactical screens. The Zephyrian cruisers were faster than the diplomatic ship, and their weapons had longer range. If this continued, they would destroy Jake's vessel before it reached safety. "All ships, open fire on the alien vessels," Admiral Parker commanded. "Protect the UES Harmony at all costs." What happened next would be remembered as one of the most one-sided battles in galactic history. The human fleet opened fire with every weapon they possessed. Military warships launched volleys of missiles while civilian vessels fired mining charges and improvised weapons. The combined firepower was overwhelming. The Zephyrian cruisers had better shields and armor than individual human ships, but they faced impossible odds. Energy beams, missiles, and explosive charges hammered their defenses from every direction. Their advanced technology was useless against such massive numbers. The alien flagship, where High Commander Vextar's superior waited, took the heaviest fire. Mining ship Captain Bill Tucker had welded high explosive charges to his vessel's hull and rammed them directly into the alien cruiser's shield generators. The explosion tore a massive hole in the enemy ship's defenses. "That's for hitting our little girl," Bill shouted over his communicator as his mining ship pulled away from the damaged alien vessel. Similar scenes played out across the battle zone. Cargo hauler Captain Sue Williams used her ship's crane arms to grab onto a Zephyrian cruiser and plant improvised bombs against its hull. A passenger transport converted its emergency lifeboats into guided missiles, each one carrying enough explosives to damage alien armor. The Zephyrian officers who had seemed so confident and superior were now fighting for their lives against an enemy they had completely misunderstood. Their rigid military tactics were useless against the chaotic but effective human assault. On the UES Harmony, Jake managed to navigate through the battle safely, while alien ships exploded around them. Emma watched through the viewport with wide eyes as the massive human fleet protected her small diplomatic vessel. "They're really fighting for me," she said in wonder, forgetting her pain for a moment. "They're fighting for the idea that children should be safe," Jake explained as he piloted toward Admiral Parker's flagship. "They're fighting to make sure no other little girl gets hurt the way you did." The battle lasted only 4 hours, but its impact would be felt for generations. One by one, the Zephyrian cruisers were overwhelmed and destroyed. Their superior technology and military training meant nothing against the fury of hundreds of humans united to protect a child. High Commander Vexistar watched through the viewport as his fleet died around him. The alien who had struck Emma Carter now understood that he had made a terrible mistake. His people had attacked something that humans valued above their own lives, and the response was devastating. "How was I supposed to know?" Vextar asked nobody in particular, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "How could I have known they would react like this to one juvenile?" Security Chief Ryan Brooks looked at the alien commander with disgust. "You should have known the moment you saw how much that little girl means to her mother. Any species that doesn't protect their children isn't worth knowing." The final Zephyrian ship, the flagship carrying Vextar's superior commander, tried to escape the battle. But there was nowhere to run. Human ships surrounded it from every direction, their weapons trained on the fleeing vessel. Admiral Parker's voice reached every ship in the human fleet. "This is what happens when you hurt our children. Remember this moment, because humanity will never forget it." The last alien ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, taking with it any chance that the Zephyrian Commonwealth would ever threaten human children again. As the UES Harmony finally reached the safety of Admiral Parker's fleet, Emma Carter looked out at the debris field that had once been alien warships. The little girl who had accidentally started an interstellar war was quiet for a long moment. "I hope they learned their lesson," Emma said softly, touching the bandage on her bruised cheek. "Nobody should hit kids, ever." The battle was over, but its consequences would reshape the galaxy. Humanity had announced their presence to the universe in the most dramatic way possible, and the message was clear: harm a human child at your own peril. 2 years after the Battle of Kepler 442, 10-year-old Emma Carter stood beside her mother on the observation deck of the massive space station called Unity Point. The scar on her left cheek had faded to a thin white line, barely visible unless someone looked closely. But the impact of what happened to her that day was still changing the galaxy. "Look at all those different ships, Mommy," Emma said, pressing her face against the viewport. Outside, dozens of alien vessels floated peacefully alongside human ships. The sight would have been impossible to imagine before Emma's injury brought humanity to the attention of the galaxy. Ambassador Linda Carter smiled at her daughter's excitement. Emma had grown into a confident child despite her traumatic experience. The little girl showed no fear of aliens now, though she was always careful around breakable objects. Each one of those ships represents a different species that wants to be friends with humanity, Linda explained. "They all heard about what happened to you, and they want to make sure we know they would never hurt children." The aftermath of the battle had surprised everyone. Instead of making enemies, humanity's fierce protection of Emma had earned them respect throughout the galaxy. Other species learned that humans were not just another primitive race to be ignored or conquered. They were a people who would fight, with incredible determination when their families were threatened. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral, walked over to join them at the viewport. He wore the uniform of the newly created Human Diplomatic Protection Service, an organization formed specifically to keep ambassadors and their families safe during alien encounters. How's our favorite diplomatic celebrity doing today? Jake asked, ruffling Emma's blonde hair. Emma giggled and straightened her hair back into place. I'm not a celebrity, Admiral Jake. I'm just a regular kid who accidentally started a war. You didn't start anything, sweetheart, Linda said gently. You were the victim of someone who didn't understand how precious children are to humans. What happened after that was the choice of people who cared about you. The space station around them was proof of how much had changed. Unity Point had been built as a neutral meeting place where humans could meet with alien species safely. Every room was designed with human families in mind, including play areas for children and strict rules about peaceful behavior. Dr. Kate Sullivan approached their group, carrying a medical report in her hands. She had been promoted to Chief Medical Officer for all human diplomatic missions after her care of Emma during the crisis. I just finished Emma's annual checkup, Kate announced with a smile. She's completely healthy. The fracture healed perfectly and there's no lasting damage from her injury. That's wonderful news, Linda said, hugging her daughter close. Though I think the emotional healing was more important than the physical healing. Emma had indeed recovered well from the trauma. She had received thousands of letters and gifts from humans across the galaxy, all expressing support and love for the little girl who had suffered for their species. The outpouring of care had helped her understand that she was not alone, and that good people far outnumbered the bad ones. Emma, there's someone here who wants to meet you, Jake said, looking toward the station's main entrance. A group of aliens walked toward them, but these were different from the Zephyrians who had caused so much trouble. These beings were smaller, with soft fur and large, gentle eyes. They moved slowly and carefully, showing respect for the humans they approached. The leader of the group bowed deeply to Emma. Young one, I am Ambassador Kith of the Gentle Winds people. We have traveled far to meet the child whose courage changed the galaxy. Emma looked up at the furry alien with curiosity rather than fear. Hello, Ambassador Kith. I like your fur. It looks very soft. The alien's large eyes seemed to smile. Thank you, little one. We wanted you to know that our people have laws that protect all children, human and alien alike. What happened to you taught us that some things are more important than politics or power. This had become a common occurrence. Alien species from across the galaxy had begun changing their laws and customs after learning about humanity's response to Emma's injury. Many civilizations that had never considered children's rights before were now creating protections for their young ones. President George Hamilton's voice came through the station's communication system. Attention, Unity Point. This is the President of Earth. Today marks the 2nd anniversary of the Kepler incident, and I want to thank all the species gathered here for joining us in our commitment to protecting children throughout the galaxy. Emma listened to the announcement with pride. She had learned that her accident had led to something called the Children's Protection Accords, an agreement signed by over 50 alien species, promising to never harm children during diplomatic meetings. I wish High Commander Vextar could see this, Emma said quietly, surprising the adults around her. Why would you want to see him again? Linda asked, concerned about her daughter's feelings. Emma thought carefully before answering. I want him to see that hurting me didn't make humans weak or scared. It made us stronger and brought all these good aliens to be our friends. Maybe if he understood that, he wouldn't be so angry all the time. The wisdom in her young daughter's words amazed Linda. Emma had somehow found a way to forgive the alien who had hurt her, while still understanding the importance of the lessons learned from that experience. Ryan Brooks, now head of security for all human diplomatic missions, approached the group. Emma, we just received word that the Zephyrian Commonwealth has officially requested a meeting with human representatives. They want to apologize for what happened and discuss peace terms. Emma's eyes widened with interest. Really? Are they going to say sorry for hitting me? Among other things, Ryan replied. It seems the destruction of their fleet taught them some important lessons about respecting other species' children. The news was significant because the Zephyrian Commonwealth had spent 2 years dealing with the consequences of their actions. Other alien species had cut off trade relationships with them after learning about the attack on Emma. Many civilizations refused to meet with any Zephyrians until they apologized to the human child they had harmed. "Will you meet with them if they come here?" Jake asked Emma seriously. "You don't have to if you don't want to. The choice is entirely yours." Emma touched the small scar on her cheek while she thought about the question. Finally, she nodded with determination. "I'll meet with them, but only if they promise never to hurt any children ever again, and they have to mean it." "I think that's a very reasonable requirement," Linda said proudly. As the day continued, more alien delegations arrived at Unity Point. Each group brought gifts for Emma and promises to protect children in their own societies. The little girl who had accidentally broken a crystal sculpture had become a symbol of innocence that needed protection throughout the galaxy. That evening, Emma sat in her quarters writing in the diary that Dr. Kate had given her to help process her experiences. Her latest entry read, "Today I met 6 new alien species and they all promised to be nice to kids. I think breaking that crystal was the most important accident I ever had. Sometimes bad things happen that lead to good things. I hope all the children in the galaxy will be safer because of what happened to me." Outside her window, the lights of dozens of spacecraft twinkled like stars. Each ship represented a species that had come to understand the importance of protecting the innocent. Emma Carter, the 10-year-old girl who had changed galactic history, fell asleep knowing that the universe was a little bit safer for children everywhere. The scar on her cheek was almost invisible now, but its impact on the galaxy would last forever. Humanity had shown the universe that their greatest strength came not from weapons or technology, but from their absolute commitment to protecting those who could not protect themselves. And in the end, that made all the difference.